He never wanted to be a hero, but that day, under the burning sun of Kandahar, he had no choice. Marcus jumped on the grenade before anyone else could react. The explosion ripped through his body, tearing muscle and bone apart, but it saved his entire unit. He should have died that day. Instead, he woke up in a military hospital 2 days later, missing a leg and covered in bandages. Everyone called him a hero. They told him he would be taken care of, that he would be honored, that his country would never forget his sacrifice. But when he returned home and walked into the VA office for the first time, the woman at the desk barely looked at him. She typed his name into the system, stared at the screen, and said, "There is no record of your injury." No report, nothing. Without that report, he couldn't receive a single benefit. That was the moment Marcus realized his real battle had just begun. Marcus stepped off the plane holding a single duffel bag and the silence of a man who had seen too much. His right leg was gone below the knee. In its place was a carbon fiber prosthetic that still felt like a stranger to his body. The air smelled different here, quieter, calmer, but not peaceful. He looked around the terminal, waiting to feel something. Relief, pride, anything. But all he felt was weight. He came home without a parade, without fanfare, without even a friend waiting at the gate. Just his brother, Chris, leaning against a pillar with a forced smile and 2 coffees in his hand. They drove back to their hometown in silence, the road cutting through fields that hadn't changed since they were kids. Marcus kept his gaze on the horizon, remembering how many times he had dreamed of this moment, coming home alive, sitting in this passenger's seat. But now that it was real, it felt empty. At a red light, Chris finally broke the silence. "You gonna be all right?" he asked. Marcus nodded without looking at him. "Yeah. Just need to get through the paperwork. They said everything's waiting for me. Benefits, rehab, support. It's all set." Chris hesitated, then nodded. "Good. That's good." But when they pulled into their parents' driveway, Marcus felt it again. That weight, that strange sense that something was off. His mother ran out to greet him, tears in her eyes, pulling him into a hug that he barely felt. His father stood back, arms crossed, jaw tight. That night at dinner, no one mentioned the leg, or the war, or the pain behind his eyes. They just passed the mashed potatoes and pretended everything was normal. Marcus played along, for now. The next morning, he went straight to the local VA office. He took a number, sat in a plastic chair, and waited, and waited. When his turn finally came, he limped up to the counter and handed over his ID. The woman typed for a long time, then looked up with a puzzled expression. "I'm not seeing anything in the system," she said. Marcus blinked. "What do you mean?" "The incident report, the injury. It's all in there. I was told everything was processed." She shook her head. "I'm sorry. There's no record of an injury. No record of any medical evacuation. Nothing about Kandahar. Just your enlistment and your discharge. That's it." Marcus felt the air drain from the room. He asked her to check again. She did nothing. No record. No report. No benefits. Just a blank space where his sacrifice should have been. As he walked out of the building, a thought crawled into his mind and refused to leave. This wasn't a mistake. This was a cover-up. Marcus didn't sleep that night. He sat on the edge of his bed staring at the stack of documents he had brought home from the hospital. Discharge papers, medical summaries, but nothing official from the day of the explosion. Nothing that would prove what happened in Kandahar. He reached out to a contact from his unit, Corporal Lane, one of the few guys still on active duty. Lane answered on the second ring, his voice tense. "Hey," Marcus said, trying to sound casual. "Do you have any record from that day in Kandahar? The incident report?" Lane hesitated. There was a long silence. Then he said, "Nah man, we never got a copy. They kept it locked up." "Why? What's going on?" Marcus explained what happened at the VA. Lane went quiet again. "Look," he said, "I shouldn't even be talking about this, but we were told not to file it like a normal incident. Commander Wallace said he'd take care of it himself. Said it needed to stay off the books, off the books." That phrase stuck in Marcus's mind like a splinter. What did that even mean? Why would Wallace do that? It didn't make sense. He had saved lives that day, risked everything. And now, because someone wanted to bury the truth, He couldn't even get a wheelchair that fit properly. The next morning, he called the base directly, asked for the incident report by name, gave them the exact date, time, location. The officer on the line said there was no report filed for any incident involving Marcus Taylor. On that date, he asked to speak to Commander Wallace directly. The request was denied. He drove back to the VA and demanded answers. This time, a supervisor met with him behind closed doors. She was polite, but firm. Without official documentation, she said, there was nothing they could do. No paperwork, no benefits, no exceptions. He showed her the scars, the hospital records. She nodded sympathetically, but repeated the same phrase. We need the original incident report. Without it, you don't qualify. Marcus walked out of the building and stood in the parking lot, breathing hard. His vision blurred. The government he had almost died for was telling him he didn't exist, that he had imagined the explosion, the surgery, the pain, and the man responsible for that report, the man who said he'd take care of it, was the only one who could explain why it had disappeared, and Marcus knew exactly where to find him. Commander Wallace had always been the kind of man people listened to. Tall, sharp jaw, eyes like steel. He walked with authority, spoke with precision, and carried a presence that made soldiers straighten their backs when he entered a room. Marcus remembered him clearly. The way he gave orders, the way he stood next to the medevac that day, eyes locked on Marcus, saying he'd make sure everything was handled properly, that he'd take care of the report personally. It took Marcus 2 days to find out where Wallace had been reassigned. He was now stationed at a military office 2 states over, working in logistics. A desk job, safe, clean, untouched. Marcus drove the entire night, pushing through pain and exhaustion, the road ahead blurry, but his mind crystal clear. This wasn't just about benefits anymore. It was about the truth, and the man who stole it from him. He walked into the military office with no appointment, no warning, just walked straight up to the front desk and said he needed to see Wallace. The receptionist hesitated, sensing the tension in Marcus's voice. She picked up the phone, whispered something, then pointed him to a hallway. 3rd door on the right. When Marcus opened the door, Wallace looked up from his paperwork, then froze. His expression didn't show surprise. It showed calculation. Marcus stood in the doorway, jaw tight. You lost my report, he said. Wallace leaned back in his chair, folded his hands, and said nothing at first. Then he said, calmly, there was no report to lose. Marcus stepped forward, his voice rising. I jumped on a grenade. I spent weeks in a hospital. You promised me. You looked me in the eyes and said you'd file the damn report. Wallace didn't flinch. His tone stayed cool. Things were chaotic that day. No cameras, no official logs, no witnesses willing to back up what happened. And if there's no documentation, then there's no case. Marcus stared at him, stunned. It wasn't a mistake. Wallace hadn't forgotten. He had erased it. On purpose. Wallace continued, his voice low now. You're not the only one who got hurt that day, but someone had to answer for it. And if that report had gone through, it wouldn't have been you paying the price. It would have been me. Marcus stepped back. The room spun. The betrayal hit harder than the blast ever did. His commander had sacrificed his future to protect his own record. And the worst part was Wallace didn't even look guilty. But Marcus wasn't going to let it end there. Marcus left the office with his fists clenched and jaw tight, but his mind was sharper than ever. The moment he got into his car, he opened a notes app and started recording everything Wallace had said, word for word. He knew it wouldn't be admissible in court, but it was something, a start. Proof that Wallace had lied, that someone with power had made a choice to bury the truth to save himself. He started making calls. Old unit members, medics, anyone who might have been there that day or remembered the aftermath. Most of them didn't answer. A few did, but once he mentioned the report, their voices dropped. They suddenly had to go. Others said they didn't remember, or that they had been told not to talk about it. One guy, Ramirez, flat out told him, look, man, I've got a family now. I can't afford to get pulled into this. I'm sorry. Marcus felt like he was drowning in silence. Everyone had moved on, or was too scared to speak, and the more he pushed, the more resistance he met. Online forums ignored his posts. Veteran support groups told him they couldn't help without documentation. One moderator even deleted his story, saying it violated group rules on unverifiable claims. He realized people didn't just doubt him. They thought he was lying. He tried reaching out to a military journalist, someone who had written pieces on veterans' issues. She listened politely, took some notes, then asked for the incident report. When he said it was missing, she paused. Without that, she said, "We're just talking about a guy with a story, and a lot of people have stories. I'm sorry." That night, Marcus sat in the dark, scrolling through a news site that highlighted soldiers who had been awarded medals, who had received full benefits. Faces smiling, stories celebrated. He stared at the screen and whispered to himself, "I was there too. I was one of them." But if no one was willing to speak, he would have to find a way to force the truth into the light. Marcus showed up at the house of Sergeant Boone unannounced. Boone had been there that day, just a few feet away from the explosion. He answered the door slowly, surprise flickering in his eyes. Marcus could tell he hadn't been expecting to ever see him again. They stood in silence for a few seconds before Boone stepped aside and let him in. The living room was small and quiet. Family photos on the walls. A faint sound of cartoons from another room. Boone offered him water. Marcus shook his head. "I just need to ask you something." Boone sat down slowly, his body tense. "Kandahar," Marcus said. "The blast. You remember. You saw it happen." Boone looked down at his hands and said nothing. "You told me I was a damn hero that day," Marcus said, his voice cracking. "And now they're saying it never happened, that it's not on record." Boone rubbed his face, then stood up and paced the room. "I've got 2 kids, man. A mortgage. A job I need to keep. You don't get it. When Wallace said to keep it quiet, we all did. Orders were orders. We thought it was temporary. Then months passed, and it was like it never existed." Marcus stood, his voice low, steady. "If none of you speak up, then it's gone. For good." Boone turned to him, eyes filled with guilt. "I know. But I can't be the first. Not alone." He left Boone's house more determined, but more alone than ever. He called 3 more soldiers from the unit. 2 didn't answer. 1 hung up as soon as he introduced himself. Each time the silence hit harder. He wasn't asking them to lie. He was asking them to tell the truth. But even the truth had a cost. If you're feeling what Marcus is feeling right now, if this story is making you angry, frustrated, or just deeply curious, take a second to subscribe to the channel and like the video. These stories need to be heard, and your support helps make that happen. Marcus sat in his car, watching the sun go down behind the trees. He felt like he was chasing ghosts. But he knew one thing. The truth didn't just disappear. It was hidden, and if he had to turn over every stone to find it, he would. Marcus knew that if no one would speak, he had to find something they couldn't ignore. Hard evidence. Something written, stored, forgotten. He started by filing a Freedom of Information request for any communication logs or reports tied to his unit's deployment dates. Weeks passed with no answer, so he did what most wouldn't. He drove to the base himself. He wasn't active duty anymore, but his ID still gave him limited access. He walked the halls like a ghost. Places once filled with noise and order now felt cold and distant. He stopped at the office of an old medic he remembered, Lieutenant Harris. She looked up, shocked to see him. Marcus explained everything. Her face shifted from sympathy to concern. She leaned in. "I remember that day," she whispered. "I treated you. We were told not to ask questions. The report was gone before I even finished stitching you up." She told him where the old field records might have been stored. A back room in the archive section. Marcus found it the next morning. Dusty boxes, broken cabinets, folders with names and dates. He searched for hours, knees aching, sweating through his shirt. Then he found it, a folder with his unit code. Inside, pages of patrol schedules, minor incident logs. But no explosion, no medevac, nothing about a blast on the day he was injured. But there was something else. A printed email between Wallace and a logistics officer dated 2 days after the explosion. The subject line read incident containment. The message was short. "Keep it quiet. No need for escalation. I'll take responsibility internally." Marcus stared at the paper, his pulse rising. This was it. Proof that Wallace had buried the truth, not just ignored it, controlled it. He took a photo of the email and saved it in 3 different places. Then he made copies. This wasn't going to be buried again. Now, he had leverage, something that could force the system to listen, something they couldn't ignore. And he had no idea how dangerous that would become. The email changed everything. Marcus finally had something real. He sent a copy to a veterans legal advocacy group, not expecting a reply. But 2 days later, his phone rang. The voice on the other end was direct and sharp. "We've seen this before," the woman said. "Quiet removals, lost records. You're not alone, Marcus. And if that email is authentic, it's enough to open an investigation." For the first time in months, Marcus felt a spark of hope. But hope didn't last long. That same night, his car alarm went off. He ran outside to find the driver's side door open. Nothing was stolen, but the glove box had been ripped apart. Every drawer emptied. The photos, the printed copies, gone. His phone rang again. Unknown number. When he answered, there was no greeting. Just a voice that said, "This doesn't concern you anymore. Let it go." Then silence. The call ended. Marcus stood frozen in his driveway, the weight of it hitting all at once. They knew. Someone had been watching, listening. And now, they were warning him. He thought about stopping, about walking away. But something inside him refused. Not after everything he had lost. Not after how many others had been silenced before him. He went to the local police, filed a report. The officer was polite but dismissive. "No forced entry. No damage. Nothing we can really follow up on." Marcus could see it in the man's eyes. He didn't believe him. Or worse, he didn't care. That night, Marcus sat at his kitchen table with the lights off, staring at the single copy of the email still saved on his phone. He pressed record on a voice memo and began speaking, detailing everything. "If anything happens to me, this is what happened." He saved the file under one word, truth. And then he made a decision. He wasn't going to hide anymore. He was going public. Marcus scheduled an interview with an independent online journalist. Not a major network, but someone known for exposing military cover-ups. They met in a small coffee shop downtown. No cameras, just a recorder and a notebook. Marcus told her everything. The explosion, the missing report, the confrontation with Wallace, the threats, the break-in, and the email. The journalist asked sharp questions. She had seen patterns like this before. Isolated cases, paperwork that vanished, veterans who were punished for speaking up. She promised to verify everything and publish a piece within a week. Marcus left the cafe with a strange mix of relief and fear. If they came after him before, what would they do once the story was out there? 2 days later, the article went live. The headline was direct. "Injured veteran denied benefits after commander buried" report. It spread fast. Veteran forums lit up. Emails flooded in. Some from strangers who said they believed him. Others from former soldiers with similar stories. But one stood out. A message from someone who said they had been there. And they had something Marcus needed to see. They agreed to meet in a public park. The man was older, thin, eyes darting nervously. He didn't say his name. Just handed Marcus a sealed envelope. Inside were 2 photos. One showed Marcus being carried to the medevac helicopter. The other was a partial scan of the original incident log. His name, the date, location, marked as classified, then removed. "Why are you giving me this?" Marcus asked. The man shrugged. "Because someone finally had the guts to speak up. Now it's your turn to finish it." Marcus didn't sleep that night. He sent everything to the legal team, to the journalist, and back to the VA. He made phone calls, demanded hearings, and the next morning, he stood outside a government building with cameras in front of him and a microphone in his hand. He told the country what had been done to him, what had been hidden, and who had buried it. And this time, people were listening. The day after his public statement, Marcus received a call from someone he didn't recognize. The voice was calm, older, and firm. "I used to work with Wallace," the man said, "and I know exactly what he did to you. Meet me tonight, alone." Marcus hesitated, then agreed. They met in an empty parking lot behind a closed diner. The man looked like he had aged 10 years too fast. His posture was stiff, like someone used to following orders. He handed Marcus a flash drive and said, "Everything you need is on here. Emails, directives, internal memos." Wallace didn't just hide your report. He ordered the log to be wiped. It was part of a pattern. Accidents that could end careers were erased, quietly, efficiently. Marcus stood in silence as the man continued. He told him Wallace had been doing it for years. Injuries, misconduct, friendly fire incidents. Anything that would damage the image of command was contained. If anyone pushed back, they were reassigned, silenced, or quietly discharged. "Why are you telling me this?" Marcus asked. The man looked him straight in the eyes. "Because I couldn't live with it anymore. And because you didn't stop. Most guys fold. You didn't." Marcus took the flash drive home and opened it. Dozens of files, timelines, names. His case wasn't just a one-off. It was part of a system designed to protect leadership at the expense of the truth. He felt sick, angry, but also vindicated. He sent everything to the legal team. This time, they didn't hesitate. A formal investigation was opened. Wallace was placed on administrative leave. Congress requested hearings, and veterans across the country started sharing their own stories. The silence was finally breaking, but Marcus knew the fight wasn't over. 6 months later, Marcus sat in the back of a courtroom, watching as Wallace took the stand. The commander looked smaller now. No medals, no uniform, just a suit and a lawyer whispering in his ear. The trial wasn't about Marcus alone. It had grown into something bigger. Systemic suppression of reports, dozens of veterans affected. And now, the truth was finally under the lights. When Wallace was asked why the report had been buried, his answer was flat. "I made a judgment call. For the sake of the unit. For the integrity of command." Marcus clenched his jaw. That sentence echoed in his mind. For the integrity of command. As if integrity had ever meant hiding the truth. The verdict came down hard. Wallace was dishonorably discharged, stripped of rank and benefits. But to Marcus it didn't feel like justice. Not entirely. He had still lost time, health, and trust. Nothing would give back the months spent in silence. The nights staring at the ceiling, wondering if he had imagined everything. The price had already been paid, and it was permanent. Still, something had changed. His benefits were finally approved. He began therapy, real therapy. His story sparked legislation aimed at reforming how incident reports were handled. The silence was broken, the shadows exposed. But for Marcus, it wasn't victory. It was survival. He stood outside the courthouse that day, looking up at the sky. A few journalists waited for a quote. He gave them a sentence that would stick. "I didn't come here for revenge. I came here to be seen." And he was. If you connected with this story, if it moved you, made you think, or made you feel something real, take a second to subscribe to the channel and like the video. We tell true stories that deserve to be heard. And there's so much more we still need to uncover. Check out our other videos and be part of the community that refuses to stay silent.